3 years after his disappearance, Ethan Caldwell's name appeared on the cover of Forbes, a billionaire no one saw coming. But the real question wasn't how he made his fortune. It was this New York had a way of making quiet men invisible. Ethan Caldwell knew this long before he ever lost anything. Every morning he stood by the window of their Upper West Side apartment watching the city wake up in layers. Yellow taxis weaving through impatient traffic suits, rushing toward glass towers, ambition vibrating in the air like static electricity. Behind him, the apartment remained immaculate, curated not by him, but by Olivia. Olivia Bennett Caldwell. She moved through spaces like she belonged to something greater than them. Even in silence, she carried expectation, the kind that pressed against the walls, against people. "Are you going to just stand there again?" she asked, not looking up from her phone. Ethan turned slightly. "Just thinking." She exhaled softly, almost a laugh. "You do a lot of that." There was no cruelty in her tone. Not yet. Just dismissal. Ethan nodded as if accepting a fact. "I'll be late tonight," she added, grabbing her coat. "Ryan invited me to a networking dinner. Investors, founders, real opportunities." A pause. "You should come sometime. It might help." "Help." Ethan watched her carefully now. "Help with what?" She hesitated just for a second, but that second said everything. "With perspective." Perspective. He didn't respond. Not because he didn't have an answer, but because he already understood hers. To Olivia, value was visible, loud, measurable in numbers, titles, invitations. Ethan's world-quiet analysis, long-term strategy, unseen positioning didn't register. It never had. She left without another word. The door clicked shut with a softness that felt heavier than any slam. At the firm, Ethan was respected, not admired, not envied. Respected in the way people respect something they don't fully understand and therefore don't fully trust. "He's smart," one colleague once said. "Just not aggressive enough." Ethan had overheard it. He always did. What they didn't know was that Ethan wasn't playing the same game. While others chased short-term wins, he studied patterns. While they competed for recognition, he mapped out systems. His investments, quiet, scattered, almost invisible, were not designed to impress. They were designed to converge. But none of that mattered at home. That night, Ethan didn't go to the networking dinner. He sat alone at the dining table, a single glass of whiskey untouched in front of him. Olivia's chair remained empty, elegant, deliberate, symbolic. At 11:42 p.m., his phone buzzed. A message from Olivia, "Don't wait up." No explanation, no apology. Ethan stared at the screen longer than necessary, not because he was hurt, because he was calculating. Weeks passed. Small changes began to surface, subtle, almost unnoticeable, unless you were looking for them. Olivia smiled at her phone more often. She dressed differently, sharper, more intentional. She started using phrases like alignment, leverage, scaling up. Ryan's name appeared more frequently. At first casually, then naturally, then inevitably. "Ryan thinks I should pivot into consulting," she said one evening, pouring herself a glass of wine. "He says I have the presence for it." Ethan leaned back slightly. "What do you think?" She shrugged. "I think he sees potential." Another pause. Ethan nodded slowly. "That's important." She looked at him, then really looked. "For some people it is." There it was. Not an insult, not directly, but a shift, a quiet redefinition of value. Ethan felt something move inside him. Not break, not crack, shift. Like a piece of a larger structure locking into place. "Do you think I have potential?" he asked. Olivia didn't answer immediately, and in that silence the truth revealed itself. "I think," she began carefully, "you're comfortable. Comfortable. Not ambitious, not driven, not enough." Ethan held her gaze. Calm, unblinking. "Is that a problem?" She hesitated again. "Then it depends on what you want out of life." "And what do you want?" This time her answer came faster, more. That night Ethan didn't sleep. Not because of anger, not because of betrayal, but because of clarity. For the first time he saw their marriage not as a relationship, but as a misalignment of value systems. Olivia didn't betray him because she lacked love. She betrayed him because she misjudged his worth. And that was a different kind of problem, one that couldn't be solved with conversation, only with consequence. The next morning, Ethan transferred a significant portion of his remaining liquid assets into an account no one knew existed. Not Olivia, not his firm, no one. Then he sat down, opened his laptop, and began restructuring everything. Not his life, his identity. Because somewhere between being overlooked and being underestimated, Ethan Caldwell had realized something dangerous. The greatest advantage a man can have is being seen as insignificant, and for the first time, he decided to use it. The news didn't arrive like a disaster, it arrived like a correction. A quiet, almost clinical recalibration of numbers on a screen. Ethan sat in the conference room, the glass walls reflecting a distorted version of himself, calm, composed, unreadable. Across from him, two senior partners spoke in careful, measured tones, as if trying not to disturb something fragile. The position collapsed faster than anticipated, one of them said. Liquidity dried up overnight. Ethan nodded once. I expected volatility. This wasn't volatility, the other partner added. This was exposure. A pause. Your exposure. There it was. Ownership, responsibility, blame wrapped in professional language. Ethan folded his hands on the table. And the firm we've contained the broader impact, the first partner replied. But your division, it's going to need restructuring. Restructuring. Another clean word. It meant loss. It meant distance. It meant removal without saying the word removal. Ethan leaned back slightly, absorbing it all, not resisting, not arguing, just integrating. How long do I have, he asked. The partners exchanged a glance. Officially, a few weeks. Unofficially, the hesitation said more than the words. We'd advise you to start transitioning now. Transitioning. Ethan almost smiled. Understood. By the time he left the building, the city hadn't changed. New York didn't react to individual collapse. It moved forward, indifferent, relentless. Phones rang. Deals closed. People laughed. No one noticed that Ethan Caldwell had just begun to disappear. Olivia noticed, but not in the way he expected. She was standing in the kitchen when he walked in, scrolling through her phone. Her expression lit not by concern, but by something closer to anticipation. You're early, she said, glancing up briefly. Meeting ended. That's new. Ethan placed his keys on the counter. There's been a shift at the firm. That got her attention. A shift, she repeated, turning fully now. What kind of shift? He held her gaze steady. My division is being restructured. The word lingered in the air. Olivia didn't speak immediately. Her eyes moved quick calculations behind them. And what does that mean? Exactly. It means my position is no longer stable. Silence. But not the kind that carried empathy. This silence evaluated, measured, reassessed. I see, she said finally, her voice softer but not warmer. Ethan watched her carefully. There it was again. Not fear, not sadness, distance. That night, Olivia dressed differently. Not dramatically, not obviously, but deliberately. The dress was sharper, the makeup more precise, the perfume stronger. Going out? Ethan asked from the living room. Ryan invited me to another dinner, she replied casually. Private investors this time. Smaller group. Ethan nodded. Sounds important. It is. She paused, then added, You wouldn't really fit into this one. The words landed gently. Too gently. Ethan looked at her, not hurt, not surprised, just aware. Probably not, he agreed. Ryan Cole was everything Ethan wasn't, at least on the surface. Confident, charismatic, loud in all the ways that attracted attention. He didn't just enter rooms. He owned them. Olivia had started mentioning him weeks ago, but now his presence felt constant, like a background noise that was slowly becoming impossible to ignore. Ryan says timing is everything, she said later that week, sipping wine. That if you hesitate, you lose. Ethan sat across from her, listening. And do you believe that? She smiled faintly. I believe he's successful. Another pause. And success leaves clues. Ethan tilted his head slightly. So does failure. She didn't respond. Because for the first time, failure had a face, and it was sitting across from her. The shift happened gradually, then all at once. Olivia stopped asking about his day, stopped waiting for him at dinner, stopped pretending that what they had was enough. In its place, something colder emerged. Comparison. Subtle at first, then undeniable. Ryan closed a deal worth 8 figures this week, she said one night, almost absently. Ethan nodded. That's impressive. She studied him. You don't seem surprised. I'm not. Why not? Because that's the kind of game he plays. A beat. And you, Ethan, met her eyes. I play a different one. She exhaled softly, shaking her head. That's exactly what I mean. What do you mean you're always distant, abstract? Like everything is theoretical to you. Her voice sharpened slightly now. Life isn't theory, Ethan. It's happening, right now. And what part of it do you think I'm missing? She didn't hesitate this time. Momentum. The word echoed long after she left the room. Momentum, forward motion, visible progress. Things Ethan had never felt the need to prove. Until now. The first real fracture didn't come from a confession. It came from absence. Olivia didn't come home one night. No message, no explanation. Just silence. Ethan sat in the dark, the city lights casting long shadows across the apartment. His phone remained still on the table. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't chase. Because somewhere deep inside he already knew. At 2:17 a.m., the door opened. Olivia stepped in quietly, heels in hand, hair slightly undone. She froze when she saw him sitting there. You're awake. Ethan didn't move. Yes. A pause. I didn't think you'd wait up. I didn't. The answer was simple, precise. She set her heels down, avoiding his gaze. It got late. The meeting turned into drinks. With Ryan? Another pause. Yes. Ethan nodded slowly. And she looked at him, then really looked. Something flickered in her expression. Guilt? No. Not quite. Justification. And what she asked carefully. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice calm, controlled. Did it feel like an upgrade? The question landed harder than any accusation. Olivia's breath caught just for a second. That's not fair, isn't it? You're reducing this to something transactional. Ethan's eyes didn't leave hers. Isn't that what it is? Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Olivia straightened slightly, her tone shifting defensive but firm. I want more out of my life, Ethan. I don't think that's a crime. It's not. Then why are you making it sound like one I'm not? He paused. I'm trying to understand the terms. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and in that silence the truth stood between them, unspoken, but fully formed. Olivia turned away first. I'm tired, she said. We can talk about this later. Ethan watched her walk toward the bedroom. He didn't stop her, didn't follow, didn't ask another question, because he already had his answer. This wasn't about love. It wasn't about connection. It wasn't even about Ryan. It was about value, perceived, measured, and ultimately rejected. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Not in defeat, in recognition. The fracture had happened, clean, irreversible. And now everything that followed would simply be consequence. The truth didn't explode into Ethan's life. It unfolded, quietly, methodically, almost respectfully, like it had been waiting for the right moment to be acknowledged. It started with a receipt, not hidden, not even misplaced, just there. Printed on thin paper, half folded between Olivia's planner pages, something she usually guarded with precision. A private room reservation at the Mercer Hotel. 2 guests. Late check-in. Ethan stared at it for a long time, not because he needed confirmation, but because of how ordinary it looked. No drama, no secrecy, just a transaction. A detail in a larger system. He placed it back exactly where he found it. No confrontation, not yet. Over the next few days, Ethan didn't change his routine. If anything, he became more present, more attentive. Not to Olivia, but to patterns. She left earlier, came home later. Her phone was always face down now, her laughter lighter but less frequent around him, and Ryan's name no longer mentioned, which said more than when it was. Ethan didn't follow her. He didn't need to. People reveal everything when they believe they're no longer being observed. The confirmation came on a Thursday night, not through messages, not through evidence, through instinct refined into certainty. Olivia stood by the mirror adjusting her earrings. The dress she wore wasn't for networking. It was too intentional. Too precise in the way it framed her body, in the way it anticipated being seen closely. Another dinner, Ethan asked from the doorway. She met his reflection in the mirror. Yes, with Ryan. A pause. Then yes. No hesitation this time. No deflection, just acceptance. Ethan nodded once. All right, that was it. No argument, no suspicion, no reaction, and somehow that unsettled her more than anything else could have. She left, and for the first time, Ethan moved. The Mercer Hotel lobby was quiet at night. Dim lighting, soft music. The kind of place where discretion wasn't just expected, it was built into the walls. Ethan didn't approach the front desk, didn't ask questions. He sat in the corner lounge, ordered a drink he didn't touch, and waited. Not for confirmation, for closure. At 11:38 p.m., the elevator doors opened. Olivia stepped out first. Ryan followed. Close enough to erase any doubt. They weren't touching. They didn't need to. The space between them carried everything. Familiarity, ease, intimacy. Ryan leaned in slightly, saying something that made Olivia smile, not the polite smile she gave Ethan, but something softer, less controlled, more real. They walked past him, didn't see him, because Ethan Caldwell was no longer part of the equation they were solving. He stayed seated long after they disappeared, not frozen, not broken, just still. Processing not the act, but the meaning. When Ethan returned home, the apartment felt different. Not emptier, clearer. Like something unspoken had finally taken shape. He poured himself a glass of whiskey. This time he drank it. Olivia came home at 1:12 a.m. She didn't expect him to be awake. That much was obvious from the way her expression shifted the moment she saw him sitting there in the same place as before. Same posture, same silence, different weight. "You're still up," she said. Ethan looked at her, not sharply, not accusingly, just directly. "Yes." She set her bag down slowly. "Couldn't sleep. I went out." That made her pause, where Ethan held her gaze. The Mercer. Silence. Not immediate. Not explosive, but absolute. Olivia's fingers tightened slightly around the strap of her bag. Why Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead he stood, walked toward her, not aggressively, not emotionally, deliberately, each step measured, until they stood facing each other, no distance left to hide in. I wanted to understand something he said quietly. Her throat moved as she swallowed. Understand what Ethan tilted his head slightly. When did you decide I wasn't enough? The question didn't sound like anger. It sounded like data collection. And that was far more dangerous. Olivia blinked, caught off guard. This isn't just answer. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I'm not asking about Ryan, he continued. I'm asking about you. A beat. When did your perception change? She looked away first. I don't think it's that simple. It is. No, it's not, she snapped, a flicker of frustration breaking through. You're trying to reduce this to one moment, one decision, because it is one decision. Ethan's gaze didn't waver. You didn't wake up one day and accidentally betray me. The word hung there now. Betray. No denial, no flinch, just truth. You evaluated, he continued. You compared. And then you chose. Olivia's chest rose, then fell. You want honesty? She asked, her voice quieter now. Yes. Fine. She met his eyes again. And this time she didn't hold back. I started noticing what my life looked like compared to others. Ethan said nothing. I saw what people around me were building, the pace, the scale, the impact. A pause. And then I looked at us. Us. Not him. Us. And what did you see? Ethan asked. Her answer came slower now, more careful, but no less honest. I saw stability. Ethan waited, and she exhaled. I saw limits. There it was, not failure, not weakness. Limits. Defined, accepted, judged. And Ryan? Ethan asked. Her lips pressed together briefly. Ryan represents possibility. Visible possibility, Ethan corrected softly. She didn't argue, because that was exactly it. Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing every word, not reacting, not defending, just understanding. So this was never about love, he said. Olivia frowned slightly. That's not fair. Isn't it? He stepped back now, creating distance again. If I had everything, Ryan has status, visibility, momentum, would you still have done this? She didn't answer, didn't need to. The silence confirmed it. Ethan let out a quiet breath. Not heavy, not broken, resolved. Thank you, he said. Olivia blinked. For what? For being honest. She stared at him, confusion flickering across her face. That's it, she asked. That's all you're going to say? Ethan picked up his glass, finishing what remained. For now. For now. Her voice sharpened. Ethan, I just admitted. I know what you admitted. He set the glass down. And more importantly, his eyes met hers one last time. I know what it means. Olivia searched his face for something, anger, pain, reaction. Anything, but found nothing she could hold on to. And that terrified her. Are you just going to ignore this? She asked. Ethan shook his head slightly. No. A pause. I'm going to respond, but not tonight. He turned away. Walked past her. Leaving Olivia standing alone in the center of the apartment, not relieved, not justified, but unsettled. Because for the first time she realized something was happening beneath the surface. Something she couldn't see, couldn't measure, couldn't control. In Ethan, he had already moved past the question of betrayal. Now he was calculating consequence. Ethan Caldwell did not collapse. He performed one. 2 weeks after the confrontation, the firm made it official. A brief internal memo, carefully worded, emotionally sterile. Due to structural realignment and recent performance volatility, Ethan Caldwell will be stepping down from his position effective immediately. No scandal, no noise, just quiet removal. To most, it looked like the natural consequence of a bad call. To Ethan, it was timing. He packed his office in under 20 minutes. No lingering, no goodbyes that mattered. A few colleagues offered polite condolences, phrases like, tough break and you'll land on your feet. Ethan nodded, thanked them, smiled, just enough to make them comfortable. None of them noticed that he wasn't disappointed. He was aligned. By the time Olivia heard the news, it had already spread through the circles she cared about. Not through Ethan, never through Ethan. Is it true? She asked the moment he walked through the door. Her voice carried something new now. Not concern. Urgency. Yes, he replied, simply setting his keys down. You didn't tell me. There was nothing to tell. Her expression tightened. You lost your job, Ethan. I left my position. That's not the same thing. Ethan looked at her. It is when the outcome is identical. Olivia turned away, running a hand through her hair. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Ethan said nothing. You don't fight, she continued. You don't push back. You just accept things. Still nothing. And now look where that got you. That made him pause. Not because of the words, but because of the certainty behind them. Where do you think it got me? He asked calmly. She turned back, frustration rising. Here, unemployed, directionless, and still acting like it's all part of some plan. Ethan held her gaze. What if it is? She laughed. Not kindly. Then it's a terrible one. That night, Olivia didn't come home. This time she didn't even pretend. No message, no explanation, just absence fully acknowledged. The following days blurred together. Ethan canceled subscriptions, closed accounts, liquidated visible assets, everything that could be seen. He let it go, slowly, deliberately, like a man shedding identity piece by piece. To the outside world, the narrative was simple. Ethan Caldwell had failed. He lost his position. His investments collapsed. His wife distanced herself. And eventually, he disappeared. But disappearance is rarely a single moment. It's a process. First, he stopped answering calls, then messages, then emails. Colleagues reached out at first out of obligation more than concern. When he didn't respond, they stopped. Out of sight, out of relevance. Olivia tried once, only once. "Are you going to tell me what you're doing?" she asked, standing in the doorway of what used to be their shared bedroom. Ethan was packing. Not clothes, documents, hard drives, things that didn't belong to the life she understood. "I already did," he said, her arms crossed. "No, you didn't. I told you I was responding. That's not an answer." Ethan zipped the bag, finally looking at her. "It's the only one you're getting." She studied him, searching for something familiar. The man she had known. The man she had outgrown. But he wasn't there anymore, not in the way she needed him to be. "You're running away," she said. Ethan shook his head slightly. "No." "Then what is this?" A pause, and then a reset. She frowned. "That's not how life works." Ethan's expression didn't change. "It is if you understand the system." Olivia stepped closer, her voice lowering. "You think disappearing is going to fix this? That you can just come back one day and everything will be different?" Ethan didn't answer immediately, because the truth was too precise to waste. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "Everything will be different." But not in the way she imagined. The last thing Ethan did before he left was transfer the final piece. An amount large enough to matter, small enough to go unnoticed, into a structure no one had access to. Not Olivia, not the firm, not even the version of himself that had existed before. The morning he left the city was unusually still. Fog settled between buildings, softening the edges of everything. Ethan stood in the apartment one last time, not reminiscing, not hesitating, just observing. Olivia's belongings were still there, perfectly arranged, perfectly curated, a life built on perception. He wondered briefly how long it would take for that structure to crack without him there to stabilize it. Then he stopped wondering, because it no longer mattered. He didn't leave a note, didn't make a call, didn't create closure. Closure was a privilege reserved for those still participating in the same reality. Ethan had already stepped out of it. By the time Olivia returned that evening, he was gone. Not temporarily, not emotionally, completely. At first she assumed distance. A few days, maybe a week. Space. That's what people called it when they didn't want to admit something was ending. But days turned into silence, and silence turned into absence. His phone went inactive. His email stopped responding. Even his bank activity, what little she could see, froze. Ryan noticed the shift. "Where is he?" he asked casually one night, pouring her a drink. Olivia shrugged too quickly. "I don't know. He needed time." Ryan smirked slightly. "Sounds like he couldn't handle it." She didn't respond. Because part of her agreed. Weeks later, the story settled. Ethan Caldwell had disappeared after losing everything. A man who couldn't recover. A man who broke under pressure. A man who simply vanished. And in the vacuum he left behind, assumptions grew, narratives formed, judgments solidified. Olivia moved forward. Or at least, she told herself she did. Ryan's world became her new center. Faster, louder, more visible. Exactly what she had chosen. But sometimes late at night, she would think about the way Ethan looked at her that last day. Not angry, not hurt, just certain. And for reasons she couldn't explain, that certainty stayed with her longer than anything else. Because deep down, beneath the noise, the movement, the illusion of progress, a question began to form. Quiet, uncomfortable, unavoidable. What if he didn't disappear because he lost everything? What if he disappeared because he no longer needed to be seen? Far from New York, in a place no one associated with his name, Ethan Caldwell opened his laptop. No past, no identity, no expectations. Only strategy. And for the first time, he wasn't reacting anymore. He was building. Power, when built correctly, is never loud. It doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. Ethan Caldwell understood this long before anyone ever underestimated him. But now, for the first time, he had the freedom to build without interference. 6 months after his disappearance, his name no longer existed in any relevant conversation. No mentions, no speculation, no curiosity. New York had already replaced him, as it always did, which was exactly what Ethan wanted. He operated through layers. Shell companies nested within holding structures, investments routed through private networks that didn't advertise returns, only access. He didn't chase opportunities. He positioned himself where opportunities would eventually converge. Artificial intelligence infrastructure, energy storage systems, undervalued logistics corridors in emerging markets. Each move small on its own, invisible. But together they formed a pattern, one no one could see. Yet. Ethan worked from places that didn't reflect ambition. A quiet apartment in Singapore, a minimalist office in Zurich. Hotel suites booked under names that didn't connect, no social media, no digital footprint that mattered. To the world, he didn't exist. But to the right people, he was becoming inevitable. Caldwell Group, one investor asked during a closed-door meeting in Geneva. Never heard of it. The man across from him smiled faintly. You haven't heard of it yet. A pause. But you will. Ethan never attended those meetings. He didn't need to. He built systems that spoke in his place. Numbers, timing, precision. While others negotiated, he structured outcomes. And slowly, quietly, the structure began to expand. Meanwhile, in New York, Olivia Bennett was living the life she had chosen. At least that's what it looked like from the outside. Ryan Cole's world was everything she once believed she wanted. Private events, exclusive circles, access to rooms where decisions were made before the public ever knew they existed. But proximity to power was not the same as possessing it. You have to learn how to adapt faster, Ryan said one evening, adjusting his cufflinks as they prepared for a gala in Tribeca. Olivia stood behind him, watching his reflection. I am adapting. He glanced at her briefly. Not enough. The words were casual, dismissive, familiar. At first she didn't notice the shift, because it mirrored something she had once done herself. Measured, evaluated, found lacking. You're still thinking too small, Ryan continued. You hesitate. Olivia crossed her arms slightly. Or maybe I just don't rush into everything blindly. Ryan smirked. That's another way of saying you're not ready. The comment lingered longer than it should have, not because it was harsh, but because it felt recognizable. That night at the gala, Olivia moved through the crowd with practiced elegance. Smiles, conversations, connections. Everything looked right. Everything felt off. She watched Ryan across the room, confident, commanding attention. But something had changed, not in him, in how she saw him. The certainty she once admired now looked like performance. The charisma rehearsed, the ambition restless, unstable. And for the first time, a thought crossed her mind. Uninvited, uncomfortable. Ethan had never needed to prove anything. Ryan never stopped. Olivia. She turned. A woman she recognized from previous events approached, champagne glass in hand. Ryan's been looking for you, she said. Something about a deal in Asia sounds complicated. Olivia nodded faintly. He didn't mention details. The woman smiled knowingly. He never does unless it's already secured. A pause. Or already slipping. That caught her attention. What do you mean? The woman tilted her head slightly. Let's just say, not everything in his world is as solid as it looks. The comment stayed with Olivia long after the conversation ended, because beneath the surface of Ryan's world, cracks were forming. Deals delayed, investors pulling back, projects that once moved quickly now stalled. Market conditions, Ryan explained one night, his tone sharper than usual, temporary. Olivia nodded, but something in his voice lacked the certainty it once carried. And in that absence, doubt began to grow. Weeks passed. The tension between them became harder to ignore, not explosive, not dramatic, just constant. You've been distant, Ryan said one evening. Olivia looked up from her phone. Have I? Yes. A beat. You're not as engaged. She held his gaze. Or maybe I'm just seeing things more clearly. Ryan's expression shifted slightly. What's that supposed to mean? Olivia hesitated, because the truth was forming in real time. It means, she began slowly, I'm starting to question what exactly I chose. Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. Ryan let out a short laugh. You're questioning this. Now I'm questioning everything. His eyes narrowed slightly. Sounds like regret. Olivia didn't respond, because for the first time, it wasn't something she could deny. Far from New York, Ethan reviewed a report, numbers aligned, timelines converging, everything moving exactly as projected. One of his associates spoke through the encrypted call. The final acquisition is ready. Once this goes through, there's no going back. Ethan didn't hesitate. Proceed. A pause. Understood. The call ended. Ethan closed the laptop slowly, not rushed, not excited, just certain. 3 years of silence. 3 years of invisibility. 3 years of building something no one had seen coming. And now the structure was complete. Back in New York, Olivia stood alone in the apartment Ryan rarely stayed in anymore. The city lights flickered outside, reflecting against the glass like fragments of something unstable. Her phone buzzed, a news alert. She glanced at it absently, then froze. A headline, short, precise, unfamiliar, yet something about it felt inevitable. Caldwell Group finalizes multi-billion-dollar global acquisition. Olivia's breath caught. Her eyes scanned the screen again and again. Caldwell. No, it couldn't be. But deep down, beneath the denial, beneath the logic, beneath everything she told herself, she already knew. The man she thought had disappeared had never been gone. He had just been becoming. And suddenly, every assumption she had ever made about him, every judgment, every decision, began to collapse. Because the truth was no longer invisible. It was coming back, with weight. The first time Olivia heard his name again, it didn't sound like memory. It sounded like power. Caldwell Group. The words moved through the room like a current, subtle electric impossible to ignore. Olivia stood near the bar at a private investment event in Midtown, her fingers wrapped around a glass she hadn't touched. Conversations flowed around her, sharp, fast, strategic, but one thread kept repeating. Caldwell. 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 Who is he? Someone asked. A man in a tailored navy suit leaned back slightly, a faint smile on his lips. That's the problem, he said. No one really knows. Another voice joined in. 3 years ago, no footprint, no presence. Now he's behind half the infrastructure deals reshaping Asia and Europe. Self-made a pause, strategically invisible. Olivia's heartbeat slowed, not faster, slower, because something inside her already understood. That name, she said quietly, almost to herself. Ryan, standing beside her, followed her gaze. What about it? She hesitated. It's familiar. Ryan shrugged. Common enough, but his tone lacked conviction, because even he could feel it. Later that night, Olivia searched. Not casually, not curiously, desperately. Article after article. Fragments of a man no one could fully define. Caldwell Group's anonymous founder declines public appearances. Speculation grows around the identity of the man behind multi-billion-dollar acquisitions. Insiders describe him as methodical, patient, and impossible to read. No photos, no interviews, no past. But then a single detail, buried deep in a financial profile, almost overlooked. Sources suggest the founder previously operated within New York's mid-tier financial sector before his unexplained departure years ago. Olivia stopped breathing. Mid-tier, New York 3 years ago. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark screen, and for the first time she didn't recognize the person looking back. No, she whispered, but denial, she realized, required uncertainty, and there was none left. Across the city, Ryan was already reacting. This is overhyped, he said sharply, pacing across his office. No one builds something like this in 3 years without exposure. His partner leaned against the desk, arms crossed. Unless they were building it long before anyone noticed. Ryan stopped. That kind of capital doesn't come from nowhere. No, the partner agreed. It comes from patience, a beat, and leverage. Ryan's jaw tightened. Find out who he is. We're trying. That's not good enough. because for the first time in a long time, Ryan wasn't the one controlling the narrative. He was reacting to it. The invitation arrived 2 days later. Minimalist, elegant, untraceable to anything conventional. Caldwell Group, private acquisition event location. The Glass House Manhattan attendance, by selection only. Olivia stared at the card for a long time. Her name was printed perfectly, not as Olivia Caldwell, but as Olivia Bennett, a detail so small it felt deliberate. Ryan noticed immediately. "You got one too." She nodded slowly. His expression darkened slightly. "So he knows who we are?" "No," Olivia thought. "He knows exactly who I am." The night of the event, the city felt different. Not louder, sharper, like something was about to shift. The Glass House stood above Manhattan walls of glass, reflecting a skyline built on ambition and illusion. Inside, the room was filled with people who defined markets moved, industries shaped futures. And yet there was a tension none of them could explain. Because the most powerful person in the room hadn't arrived yet. "Have you seen him?" someone asked. "No." "Does he even exist?" A quiet laugh. "He exists. That's the problem." Olivia stood near the edge of the room, her breath controlled, her posture perfect. But inside, everything was unraveling. Every memory, every word, every moment she had dismissed was returning, not as nostalgia, as evidence. Ryan stood beside her, unusually silent. For once, he had nothing to say. Then the room shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a subtle change in attention, like gravity itself had adjusted. The doors opened, and Ethan Caldwell walked in. No announcement, no introduction, no need. He didn't look different in the way Olivia expected. No exaggerated display of wealth, no performative confidence. Just refined, sharpened. Everything about him was quieter, more precise, more controlled. The same man, and yet not the same man at all. Conversation stopped, not completely, but enough, because even those who didn't know who he was felt it. Presence. Ethan moved through the room without urgency, without hesitation. People approached him, not the other way around. Respect wasn't offered. It was assumed. Olivia couldn't move. Her body refused. Her mind was already collapsing under the weight of realization. This was him. Not a possibility, not a theory, a fact. Ryan exhaled slowly beside her. "That's him." Olivia didn't answer, because there was nothing left to confirm. Ethan's gaze moved across the room once, not searching, not scanning, observing, and then it landed on her. No shock, no emotion. Recognition. Like he had always known this moment would happen. Olivia's breath caught, not because of who he had become, but because of what she suddenly understood. He had never been behind. He had always been ahead. He just chose the moment to be seen. Ethan didn't walk toward her immediately. He let the distance exist, let the silence stretch, let the weight of his presence do the work for him. Ryan shifted, slightly uncomfortable for the first time since she had known him. "I'll talk to him," he said, already stepping forward. A mistake. Ethan acknowledged Ryan with a glance. Polite, measured, nothing more. "Mr. Caldwell," Ryan began, extending a hand. "Ryan Cole. We've been following your recent acquisition's impressive work." Ethan looked at his hand, then at him. A brief pause, just long enough to establish hierarchy. Then he shook it, lightly. "Thank you," Ethan said. His voice hadn't changed. That was the most unsettling part. Ryan smiled, masking the shift he couldn't control. "We should talk. There may be opportunities for collaboration." Ethan held his gaze. "Possibly." One word. No commitment, no interest. Ryan nodded, stepping back, because for the first time he didn't know how to position himself. Ethan turned, and this time he walked toward Olivia. Each step unhurried, unavoidable. She felt it before he reached her, the shift, the imbalance. 3 years ago she had been the one evaluating him, measuring, judging. Now the roles had reversed, and there was no system she could use to understand it. "Ethan," she said, her voice barely holding. He stopped in front of her, close enough to erase the past, far enough to make it irrelevant. "Olivia." No warmth, no hostility, just acknowledgement. She searched his face, for anger, for resentment, for anything that felt human, but found only control. "I didn't know," she began, then stopped, because the sentence had no ending that made sense. Ethan tilted his head slightly. "You didn't know," her voice broke just slightly, "that it was you." A pause. Then Ethan gave the smallest nod. That was the point. Silence. Not empty. Final. Because in that moment, Olivia understood something she would never be able to undo. He hadn't disappeared because he lost everything. He disappeared because he knew exactly what he was becoming. And she had chosen to look away. Now there was nowhere left to look. Only consequences. Power rarely announces itself. It reveals. The Glass House event ended without a climax. No speeches, no declarations, no visible turning point, and yet everything had already shifted. Olivia felt it the moment Ethan walked away from her, not abruptly, not dismissively, just without need. 3 years ago, silence between them had meant distance. Now it meant hierarchy. Olivia. Ryan's voice cut through her thoughts. She turned, still slightly disoriented. We need to talk, he said, his tone tighter than usual. About what? About him. A pause. You knew. It wasn't a question. Olivia held his gaze. I suspected. That's not the same thing. No, she agreed quietly. It's worse. Ryan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. This changes things. Olivia almost laughed. Not out of humor, but clarity. Everything was already changing, she said. We just didn't see it. Ryan didn't respond. Because for once, he didn't have control over the narrative. Across the room, Ethan stood with a small group of investors. He wasn't speaking much. He didn't need to. Others leaned in, adjusted their tone, matched his rhythm. Influence didn't radiate from him. It reorganized the space around him. Olivia watched, and for the first time she saw the full scope of her miscalculation. Not just who he had become, but who he had always been. The days that followed didn't bring closure. They brought tension. News of Caldwell Group's expansion spread quickly. Markets reacted. Competitors adjusted. Investors repositioned. And somewhere within that movement, Ryan's name began to lose weight. 2 of our backers pulled out, he said one afternoon, pacing across his office. Olivia sat across from him, quiet. They're redirecting capital. To Caldwell, she asked. Ryan didn't answer. Because they both knew. What is he doing? Ryan muttered. This isn't just growth, it's targeted. It was, but not in the way Ryan understood. Ethan wasn't attacking. He was absorbing. Position by position, opportunity by opportunity. And every move he made revealed something unsettling. He wasn't reacting to the market. The market was reacting to him. Olivia requested the meeting 3 days later, not through emotion, not impulsively. Deliberately, the response came within the hour. Approved, no message, no tone, no implication. Just access. Ethan's office overlooked the city. Not from the highest floor, but from the most strategic one. Olivia noticed that immediately. Of course he wouldn't choose visibility. He would choose control. She stood outside the glass door for a moment longer than necessary, then knocked. Come in. His voice was the same. That was still the most disorienting part. Ethan stood by the window, hands in his pockets, watching the city below. He didn't turn immediately, didn't rush. Close the door, he said calmly. She did. Silence settled between them, not awkward. Measured. You wanted to see me, he said. Olivia took a step forward. Yes. A pause. I needed to understand something. Ethan turned then, slowly, fully. And for a brief moment, the past and present overlapped. Then it disappeared. What do you need to understand, he asked. Her throat tightened slightly, not from fear, from awareness. How long, she asked. Ethan didn't react. How long have you been building this, she continued. Before you left. Before everything. A beat. Then long enough. The answer landed heavier than specifics ever could. Olivia exhaled slowly, so none of it was accidental. No. Not the investments? No. Not the timing? No. Her voice dropped. Not even us. That made him pause. Not emotionally. Precisely. I didn't plan your decisions, he said, but I understood them. The distinction cut deeper than accusation. Olivia stepped closer. You knew what I would do. Ethan held her gaze. I knew what you valued. Silence. And you let it happen, she asked, her voice barely controlled. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Would you have believed me if I told you otherwise? She didn't answer. Because the truth was obvious. No. You needed to see it for yourself, he continued, just like I did. Olivia's chest tightened. This wasn't just observation, Ethan. You disappeared. You let everything fall apart. I removed variables. The words were cold, not cruel, exact. You removed me, she said. Ethan didn't deny it. You removed yourself, he corrected quietly. That landed. Because it was true. A long silence followed. Not empty. Finalizing. I made a mistake, Olivia said finally. Not defensively, not dramatically. Clearly. Ethan didn't respond. I thought I understood value, she continued. I thought I knew what mattered. You did, Ethan said. She looked up confused. You just defined it too narrowly. Her eyes searched his face for an opening, a fracture. She hesitated. Is there any part of you that still... No. The answer came before the question finished. Not harsh. Immediate. And absolute. Olivia flinched. Not visibly. But internally, something collapsed. Not hope. Illusion. Ethan stepped back slightly, creating distance again. You're not here for closure, he said. You're here because the outcome changed. Her breath caught. That's not... It is. His voice remained calm. If none of this had happened, if I hadn't returned like this... A pause. Would you be here? She didn't answer. Because she couldn't. Ethan nodded once. Then this conversation is already resolved. Olivia felt the shift completely now. There was no argument to win, no emotion to leverage, no past to return to. Only consequence. As she turned to leave, her voice stopped him. Ethan. He didn't move. You said you were responding, she said softly. A pause. This is the response. Ethan finally looked at her again. And for the first time, there was something behind his eyes. Not anger. Not pain. Completion. This, he said quietly, is just the beginning. Olivia stood there, realizing too late. The power shift hadn't happened when he returned. It had happened long before he disappeared. She just hadn't seen it. And now, she was standing inside a game he had been controlling all along, with no way out, only the end left to face. The collapse didn't begin with a scandal, it began with a meeting. The boardroom at Caldwell Group was designed without excess. No grand chandeliers, no aggressive displays of wealth, just glass steel and silence. Olivia noticed that immediately, because everything about Ethan's world now was intentional. She sat at the far end of the table, hands folded, posture composed. Across from her, Ryan shifted slightly in his chair, his usual confidence reduced to something more fragile. Around them, investors, legal advisors, and executives reviewed documents that would decide the future of multiple companies. And buried within those documents was the final convergence. This acquisition, one of the senior partners began, will consolidate control over 3 major logistics corridors across North America and Southeast Asia. A pause. Final authority rests with Caldwell Group. Olivia's eyes flickered just slightly, because she understood what that meant. Not influence. Control. Ryan leaned forward, forcing steadiness into his voice. We've already secured preliminary agreements on 2 of those corridors, he said. Our firm is positioned to co-lead number. Ethan didn't raise his voice, didn't interrupt sharply, but the single word cut through everything. The room stilled. Ryan blinked. I'm sorry. Ethan looked at him directly. Calm, unmoving. You're not in a position to co-lead anything. Silence. Not uncomfortable. Final. Ryan straightened. We've invested months into this. Capital relationships and leverage you didn't actually control, Ethan replied. A document slid across the table. One of the legal advisors spoke. Your firm's primary backers withdrew 2 weeks ago. Their capital has already been reallocated. Ryan's expression faltered. That's not possible. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't need to, because the evidence was already in front of him. Olivia felt it then, the full weight of what was happening. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a revelation. You planned this, Ryan said slowly, his voice tightening. Ethan tilted his head slightly. I anticipated it. That's the same thing. No, Ethan said calmly. Planning requires reaction. A brief pause. Such was alignment. The distinction landed harder than any accusation. Ryan leaned back, the cracks no longer subtle. You've been targeting us. Ethan's gaze didn't shift. I've been building around you. The difference was devastating, because it meant Ryan had never been the focus. Just a variable. Olivia's breath grew shallow, not from fear, from realization. Every delay, every failed deal, every investor who suddenly changed direction, it hadn't been coincidence. It had been design. And Ethan had been in control long before any of them noticed. Why, Ryan demanded. Why go this far? Ethan finally leaned forward slightly, not aggressively, just enough. To remove instability. Ryan's jaw tightened. You're talking about my company like it's disposable. Ethan held his gaze. It is. Silence collapsed inward. Olivia closed her eyes for a brief moment, because now she understood her role in all of this. Not as a victim, but as a catalyst. Ethan, her voice was quieter now. He looked at her. Not cold, not warm, clear. You didn't just leave, she said. You watched all of this happen. I observed, he corrected, and did nothing. Ethan paused. Then number. A beat. I made sure the outcome was accurate. The words didn't sound like revenge. They sounded like correction. Olivia's chest tightened. Accurate to what? Ethan studied her for a moment, then answered. To value. That word again. But now it carried weight she couldn't escape. You measured everything, he continued. Visibility, status, momentum. A pause. So did I. Her breath caught, because suddenly everything aligned. You let me choose, she whispered. Ethan nodded once. And you let me reveal what I would choose. Yes. The simplicity of it was unbearable. Tears didn't come, because this wasn't loss in the way she understood it. This was exposure. Ryan stood abruptly. This isn't over. Ethan didn't even look at him. It is. Security moved subtly closer, not aggressively, but decisively. Ryan hesitated, then left. Not defeated loudly, but removed. Olivia didn't move, because she knew her outcome wouldn't be that simple. The room slowly emptied. Executives, advisors, observers, until it was just them. Again. But nothing about this moment resembled what they once had. You could have stopped it, she said quietly. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Then number. Her voice trembled just slightly. Why not? Ethan looked at her. And for the first time, there was no distance in his answer. Because you needed to see what you were willing to lose. A pause. Before you understood what it was worth. Olivia's vision blurred. Not from emotion, from clarity. And now she asked. Ethan stepped back, reclaiming space. Now he said calmly, you live with it. No anger, no punishment, no spectacle. Just consequence. Olivia let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Everything she had chosen was gone. Ryan, status, position. But worse than that, the version of her future that had once existed was no longer possible. Not because Ethan took it away, but because she had. Ethan turned toward the window. The city stretched out below him, unchanged, unconcerned. I never needed to destroy you, he said quietly. Olivia looked at him. You already made the decision that did. Silence. Final. She stood there for a moment longer, then turned, and walked away. Not chased, not stopped. Just released. Ethan remained where he was, not watching her leave, because he had already seen the outcome long before this moment. Victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like completion. No revenge, no anger. Just truth, finally revealed. And as the door closed behind Olivia, Ethan Caldwell stood alone, not as the man who had been abandoned, but as the man who had never lost control. Because in the end, the greatest power he ever held was never being seen clearly until it was too late.